So hello everyone, my name is Danilo Giglitto and I am a research associate at King's University in the UK. First of all, I want to thank my co-authors and Shaimaa Lazem from Sarta City in Egypt, which is here and will join me during the Q&A session, and Dr. Preston, which works with me at King's University. So today I'm going to present some findings that are stemming from our attempt to engage with CHI communities emerging outside the global north to explore how participation is enacted and configured in social, cultural, and political contexts that are different from Western societies. And our findings show that more theoretical and practical work is needed to better understand postcolonialism issues in design processes. Our project is called the Hilali Network, which is an institutional link between King's University and the City of Scientific Research and Technological Application in Egypt. And the project has two main objectives. One is to advance HCI education in Egypt by empowering local designers. And the other one is about safeguarding Bedouin intangible heritage through digital means. For those of you that don't know, intangible heritage is the immaterial counterpart of heritage, and it refers to traditions and social practices rather than monuments and or natural sites. In many parts of the world, intangible heritage is at risk because of societal changes, and so is the intangible heritage of the Bedouins. In fact, the Bedouins living near Sarta City are the users for the design that took place within our project. The importance of this project stems from two main premises. The first is about identified barriers for HCI education in Egypt. In fact, HCI is far from being an established discipline within traditional curriculum, and there is some skepticism about its usefulness in computer science and engineering courses. The second premise is about the fact that even though the digital documentation of intangible heritage is really benefiting from the advancement of digital technologies, there are still some barriers about engaging heritage keepers with digital platforms, because one reason is the expectation from practitioners that building user-friendly platforms is enough for the user generation of content to be happening. And the other one is the digital illiteracy that may regard heritage keepers, especially elderly people. So we thought that ICH digital documentation could really use the application of HCI principles, and this is why we focus on the training of local designers to establish best practice for HCI and ICH integration. And as you can see, the two acronyms mirror one another. And also the specific configuration of the project, which is a partnership between the UK and Egypt, enabled us to look at something we were interested in from the outset, which is the exploration of post-colonial and decolonizing stances in learning about HCI. So we looked at the literature and we engaged with these three main scholarly movements. So these raise similar points, but for or from different contexts. Originally, postcolonialism was only studied in the West. This is represented by the first example, but then it started to be studied in the East too, and AfriCHI and ArabHCI are two excellent examples about studying how to decolonize HCI. So the first example, yes, from Western researchers. They explore how they explore postcolonialism issues in cross-cultural design involving developed and developing countries, and the problem there would be the expectations from the former countries that their technology design would have the same applicable value in any other context. And this ethnocentric view, according to which there is only one path towards technological advancement, leads to a sort of disregard for cultural specificities and alternative paths. This literature has a certain merit, and it is that they offered an idea of postcolonialism as a fluid entity, so as fostered by assumptions, observations, and so they pointed out where to look at. And we made these concerns ours, even though they explore postcolonialism issues in geographically disjointed projects involving developed and developing countries. We try to bypass these issues by localizing our design as a design from within the Egyptian context. We also engaged with AfriCHI. AfriCHI moved this criticism from the underrepresentation of African researchers within the dominant HCI discourse, and from the paradox that American and European researchers publish more about African HCI than Africans themselves. So to try addressing this underrepresentation, they founded AfriCHI indeed, which is a parallel HCI conference that give voice to these scholars while also being open to form of research, dissemination, and presentation that respected the culture and the language of each scholar, and in doing so that are different from the ones within the dominant HCI discourse, such as this one. And finally, if Africa is perhaps more in line with the HCI style of sub-Saharan countries, Egypt's situation is more in line with ArabHCI, which is a movement led by Western-trained researchers engaged who trust the methods and the principles produced within the global HCI. However, ArabHCI sides with Africa with regards to where the intellectual effort for advancing HCI should come from. And differently from Africa, which is composed of a developed community with a clear decolonizing agenda, ArabHCI does not have a separate agenda from the global one. So all three approaches inspired us. And I would say that our approach lies in the gray area between the post-colonialism and decolonizing, as we found it very hard to draw a rigid line. So we wanted to align with the decolonizing stance in that we localize the actors, the problems, the solutions, and we configure the design as a design from within the Egyptian context. However, we also engage with the issues raised by the post-colonialism stance in that we explored the power imbalance within our project, and we also looked out for attitudes and assumptions. Our approach informed the Hilali Summer School, which was both our way to advance HCI in Egypt and our case study. The Hilali Summer School ran for 8 days at Sarta City in Egypt in August 2017. And the theme for the school to design technology for Bedouin ICH documentation helped in exposing the students to users and participants from a different culture to explore a new context and to revisit any assumption they might have had about a typical mobile phone user. To structure the school activity, we used the double diamond design process by the UK Design Council, which is a model composed of 4 stages: discover, define, develop, and deliver, with each 2 stages forming a diamond shape. So the first and the third stage are more exploratory and based on divergent thinking, while the second and the fourth are to narrow down the scope and define the focus. Also, we structured the school in a way that each stage had a big participatory moment between the students and the community of Bedouins. 18 engineer students from Alexandria University joined the school, and previous HCI school at the same institute suggest, and this school confirmed, that this particular cohort of students has technically oriented mindsets, and it's somewhat skeptical about the disciplines they classified as humanities, including HCI. So we tried to make the school more appealing to them. We tried mostly to mentor them in a problem-based learning environment. And this school was built in a way that they could gradually build a partnership with the Bedouins, while we, so me and Dr. Shaimaa, remained as facilitators. Lectures about heritage and about HCI were mostly included in the first 2 stages, while during the second stages, they had the chance to self-explore many themes in team-based activities. And so, as I said, the Hilali Summer School was also our case study, and we applied post-colonial and decolonizing investigative lenses to try bring forward the 3 scholarly movements I listed before. So we formulated 2 main research questions, which are anchored to 2 different perspectives. One is an international perspective, which is about how the students perceive the power dynamic within our project, and also an international perspective, which is about the challenges for the students in enacting the participation of a culturally distant community. All the data for the school was collected by both instructors and students. We mostly relied on ethnographic observations at field notes, while an important second source of data was represented by the material submitted by the students, mostly through Google Forms, and this included self-assessment forms, ethnographic diaries, and research tasks. So for the power dynamics, we proposed this exercise, which was inspired by the concentric circles by Stephen Covey. So the original exercise was about things that people have control over or not. So we replaced the control aspect with power and benefits, and then we basically asked the students to distribute the stakeholders in our project in the circle. So in the innermost circles, the stakeholder holding the most power or getting the most benefits, and in the outer circles, the power and benefit would gradually lessen. And so this exercise was originally thought to see the perceived position of the community in the eye of the students, but then we discovered something else, and now I'm reporting only the findings that are relevant to this discussion. And this is that the students place themselves either in the circles, but all together with the instructors, so me and Dr. Shaimaa, and other institutions, including Western ones, such as King's University, or they place themselves at the periphery of the circles, preceded by, once again, Western institutions and even UNESCO. And so this was very surprising to us, in that we structured the curriculum in a way that not to interfere too much with their decision making, and in a way that they could lead the design process. So it was worrying to see that they were sort of perceiving a lack of agency within the school, and their actions were somewhat supervised by the West. When we looked instead at what was going on between the students and the community, we found two instances in which 2 out of 4 teams tended to emphasize the cultural distance with the community. We call these two attitudes white savior and othering. The white savior group, they had developed a condemnatory attitudes towards the male dominant aspect of the Bedouin community, especially the role of the women as relegated to taking care of the household and raise the children. So this group, these feelings made the group feel collaborating with the Bedouin as a greater challenge than before, knowing these traits, as they started to perceive the community too distant from their cultural and social values. So one man argued they were trying to colonize the community in a way through the design, in that they started to pursue design that were to sort of save the women rather than what was grounded in the fieldwork. And the second group, the othering group, they struggled to empathize with a low literate Bedouin. This culminated when they handed over an overly complicated cultural probe that the user refused to take because he said he was too busy. This user was even defined as problematic. Eventually, this user was replaced for other reasons by a well-educated Bedouin, and they started to get along much better all of a sudden. So our findings suggest that the scenario is really complex, because the power dynamics suggests that initially our school had the colonialist flavor for the students, in that Western institutions were, such as King's University, were sort of misrepresented as having much agency in the design process. But when we looked in the ground, we could see that new power relationships were forming, and that they were fed by a lack of empathy or a sort of patronizing attitudes towards the community. So we believe that the road towards understanding post-colonial and decolonizing stances in learning about HCI is still underexplored. So this is why I want to close this presentation with 3 main recommendations to engage the HCI community with these themes. The first, perhaps most obvious one, is about supporting local HCI communities such as AfriCHI and ArabHCI, because they could enable to better explore a context, and in doing so make more likely to encourage voice from marginalized community. The second recommendation is about exploring complexity, embracing complexity, and we suggest to explore preconceptions at a micro level. And the last one is about exploring power dynamics with local teams, because this could reveal hidden struggles and perceived lack of agency that need addressing. So yeah, this was all. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Hi, Reem Talhout from Open Lab. I was just wondering about, you talked a lot about the perception of the students, of the participants, but my question is regarding how did the participants perceive the students and the research team in itself coming from a university, and how that was dealt with within the data collection and balancing that power dynamics?
Well, the way we framed the participation with the community was that we told them upfront that these are students and they are coming part to learn about the Bedouin culture and also to develop an app. So they knew that the students are learning in some way, and so we kind of framed the mutual learning thing. And these are students, and that was well perceived by the Bedouins.